Hey, welcome back to the show. I'll be giving my first impressions of the Marshall SV20H, the Studio Classic Plexi, the 20-watt version today. It's made in the UK and it's designed to give you that whole 1959 100-watt Plexi feel in a smaller space, but we'll just be checking it out today and I'll just be really interested to see what sort of metal tones we can get out of it, but stick around. So straight away it easily identifies as the classic Plexi with no master volume, the 4 inputs. It's just, you got to turn it up to get that tone out of it. But I'm running through an attenuator today. I'm going through the 2 notes Torpedo Captor X. We're just simulating a standard Marshall 412 cab with V30s inside, an SM57 pushed up to it. And that way I can really turn this up today, not deafen the birds, not have any noise in the room. I've never owned a Plexi before and I was really interested just to see how they actually react when you try and push a lot of gain through them. How does the effects loop stand up with EQs and everything going through them, and just how do they handle metal today? So for the basic understanding of a Plexi, essentially they've just got the 2 different inputs, a treble input and a low input. And the amp really just behaves differently off each. On the treble input, it's very ice picky, it's very shrill. It's just got that classic Plexi sound, but in a live speaker scenario in the room, I just found it was absolutely painful on the ears. But then going through the low input alone, I just found it really wet blanket and really dull. And so in this way, you can set it up so you can jump the pair and then use a master volume for each of the inputs and really just get a blend of whether you want more treble or more bass, and it really comes from the master volumes. And if you can understand that, you're halfway there. Is the actual tone stack on the Plexis, they don't behave as usual. You'd think that altering the bass, middle or treble, you'd be changing the front end of the amp, but you're not really changing the tone as such, you're just changing the way the amp actually behaves for an output. It's a weird thing to try and discuss, but we'll just try and go through it in a little tick. But for the classic Plexi tone, right now I've got them both jumped and I've got both the master volumes right in the middle. And this is really just the classic Plexi tone that we all know. And you get the idea, it's the classic Plexi we all love, and if we don't bridge the high and the low inputs, this is the tone that you get. We're on the high input plugged right into now. And that's straight off the high input there, and I just find it's a little bit too shrill, a little bit too trebly. That's how Randy Rhoads ran it, and that's how a lot of people ran it, but I think for balance of the Plexi, it's a really hard machine to try and get some of those lower bass frequencies out of. And now we'll just go straight into the low input. And you can hear that's not so desirable on its own. That's why a lot of people tend to bridge the two and just get a little bit more beef out of that high input. So just like the classic Plexi, the only way that you get any sort of drive out of the amp is by turning up the master volumes, and they actually work as part of the tone stack here. There's no gain control, but what I did find with this amp, as soon as that volume gets to about level 3, there's no actual increase in dB coming out of the amp. It just seems to be all the different tone that you get. But I'll play a short riff now, we'll just loop it, I'll play around with the tone stack and the volume controls, we'll just blend and work out how that amp works, and then we'll get onto some pedals and just see how we can drive the front end. And I guess you could see there that as I was just blending those two master volume controls, it really didn't make any effect to the actual output or the decibel rating of the amp. It just really blended whether it's a darker or brighter tone. And you could tell by the tone stack that even though I really wanted to have a little bit more bass on that tone, turning up the bass really didn't just change it, and it didn't make the bass frequencies like any more desirable. It just seems to, it's really an amp, it's a really stubborn amp, it's a bit of a pig of an amp, and you just got to really find a sweet spot for the tone that you're wanting and have the amp actually behave that way. They've got that absolutely classic sound to them, but as far as being a diverse amplifier that's going to get like a whole different array of tones, they're not going to do that. You just get the one tone that you want, but it does it really well. But I really want to see how pedals drive the front end, if we can get some different modern tones, how EQs affect the effects loop. So just to quickly explain the pedal board, all these pedals down the bottom here are working like overdrives. They're all in the front end of the amp. And these pedals up the top, I've got the MXR 10 band, the Master Effects PM EQ, and the carbon copy delay. They're all going through the effects loop. So we'll just start with the Boss Super Overdrive, the SD1. I've got the level all the way up, the tone roughly at noon, and the drive just cracked off the bottom there. And that really gives you that classic Metallica, like that debut album tone that they had, like the No Life Till Leather. And there's a copy of that on YouTube. It's remastered and done really well. I'll have links for that in the description, but it's really worth checking out with Dave Mustaine and the band and everything. It's got a whole different dynamic. I think it's a better tone than on Kill 'Em All itself. And next we get to the Fort and Grind, and this is a really modern style sounding pedal that it needs a lot of bass going through the amp to actually sound big and huge, but I really think it shows the direction that you can push a plexi, especially when you mod it, just like Mike Fortin does with his, like the Meshuggah amps and things. And it really changes the dynamic of the amp to give you that sort of tone almost. You can hear with that it really just pushes the front end of that amp and just really makes it sound almost like it's got that really cutting sort of distortion going on. A lot of the bass is lost out of that, but at the same time in the effects loop, if we run that, turn on the MXR 10 band, boost some of these bass frequencies, we really might just get a nice sort of heavy metal tone out of that. And that really just bridges the gap a little bit and makes it usable in today's times just as a modern metal sort of monster. It looks very retro, but you can get some really modern hard-hitting tones out of it. Next, the Zakk Wylde Overdrive. I've really just cranked this up, and if I use it in turn with the MXR carbon copy delay, I can get some really cool sort of retro guitar solo style tones. And that's loads of fun. You get some really authentic, really cool sort of live barrier thrash tones. If you're a fan of that early metal scene, I think this is a really cool amp. You'd just be smiling all day. And next we've got the MEQ driver by Origin Effects. I think this is my favorite pedal that I think goes really well with the plexi. It drives the front end just enough just to really make it bloom, make all those frequencies come out. I think it's just really cool. it just perfectly nails that whole tone. We've been trying to get that Killing Is My Business tone from Megadeth for so long, and just this setup with that MEQ driver, the plexi amp, it's just perfect. It also dials in that perfect tone for that early Metallica, the No Laugh Till Leather as well. It's a fantastic tone, and when you mix it with the carbon copy delay like the Wild Overdrive, you go into your solos. I think it'd be a really fun amp to go out and gig with and just have a lot of fun just recreating some of those old school vibes like in a club or something. But next we'll just try and dial in some of these EQs, get more of like a modern take. But something I found just using this amp, there's no room for EQs in the loop. It's like it's got such a diverse spectrum of tone coming out of it that you can't just really like push it and sculpt mids and work the amp the same way as any other amp. So I'll just show you exactly what I mean now, but it doesn't behave like you think it should. I'll drive the front end a little bit, but we'll just try and scoop some of those mids out, increase the bass, try and get more of that sort of Master of Puppets sort of tone if we can. And hopefully you could see exactly what I was saying there. It's like there's no room for the EQs to even work in the loop. This Master Effects PMEQ, it's really sensitive through every other guitar amp and through the effects loop. You can really dramatically just like boost the bass and scoop out the mids, and in the ranges that I was doing it then, it just would have been far too much, but in this case you could barely notice that it was even on it. And even if you tried to just drag too much mids out of it, you just got this weird sort of fizzy tone at the end. None of it was actually desirable at all. So, but I guess it's a plexi. It doesn't try and be any other amp. Lots of other amps try and be a plexi, but this is what it does. It does one job really well. It's got that old school metal vibe. I think you can really mix it in to try and get some of those metal tones, but I think it really shines for me in that early 80s sort of metal scene. And it's a really cool amp, great addition to the room. And thanks for tuning in, guys. I really hope you enjoyed the video, and we'll see you next week. Bye.